I was 12 when this happened, old enough to sense when something felt off, to read the tension in the air, to understand that danger can lurk anywhere, yet still young enough to catch the attention of people who thrive on seeking out kids like me. We lived on a fairly busy street, but our block was tucked away at a dead end, right near a dense forest preserve. Across from our house there was a sump, and if you cut through the thick, shadowy forest, you'd end up in a small community park hidden just beyond the trees. It was a Saturday night, the kind that hung heavy with the sound of cicadas and the distant rumble of traffic. A small carnival had set up in that park for the weekend, its glow visible through the breaks in the trees like a warm pulse in the darkness. I didn't have plans with friends that night, so when my mom suggested I go check out the carnival, I shrugged. She wasn't the kind of parent who hovered or warned me to stay inside once the sun dipped below the horizon. She let me roam, trusted me to find my own way, and that night was no different. So I decided to go. With a flashlight clutched in my hand, I made my way into the forest, the beams slicing through the darkness as branches creaked and leaves shifted underfoot. The air was cooler there, a damp, earthy scent clinging to it, and every step felt like it echoed, even though it was probably just in my head. Eventually, I reached the rusted fence that separated the forest from the park, ducking under a bent section that had been pushed aside by others before me. On the other side, the world was suddenly lit up in shifting, blinking colors. Carnival lights spun lazily above the tree line, throwing reds, yellows, and blues across the grass in fractured patterns. I could see the Ferris wheel turning slowly against the night sky, a mini roller coaster rattling along its short track, the shrieks of kids momentarily piercing the hum of generators. Giant spinning rides moved like ghosts in the glow, while the smell of funnel cake and popcorn drifted lazily through the air from the concession stands and game booths that lined the carnival's edge. For a moment, the scene felt comforting, a bubble of warmth and laughter under the night sky. But even then, as I stood at the edge of that carnival, taking in the blinking lights and the smell of fried food, something about the darkness beyond the lights made the hair on the back of my neck prickle, as if something was quietly watching from the shadows I had just passed through. It was late enough that the carnival had thinned out, leaving behind only the hum of the generators and the occasional echo of laughter drifting between the rides. The lights from the Ferris wheel and game booths reflected off empty patches of pavement, flickering softly like restless fireflies in the dark. I wandered around for a while, taking in the sights, until I noticed a big circus tent off to the side, its red and white stripes looking almost faded under the glow of the carnival lights. A few people were walking toward the tent, slipping inside, their shadows briefly stretching across the grass before disappearing through the flap. My curiosity got the better of me, so I moved closer, pushing aside the heavy fabric just enough to poke my head in. Inside, there were 4 rows of people sitting quietly in folding chairs, their faces dimly lit by the soft glow of colored bulbs strung along the edges of the tent. The air smelled like stale popcorn and dusty fabric, the scent clinging to the stillness inside. On a small, creaky stage, 3 clowns were performing under a single spotlight that buzzed faintly above them. One clown pedaled a tiny tricycle in slow, jerky circles, his oversized shoes dragging along the wooden floor. Another was juggling bright pins that clicked softly each time they left or landed in his hands, the rhythm oddly hypnotic. The third clown was just dancing, moving in exaggerated slow-motion steps that didn't quite match the faint carnival music playing in the background. Then, suddenly, the dancing clown's head snapped in my direction, and I felt a jolt run through me as he locked eyes with me from across the tent. Without missing a beat, he started skipping toward me, each step strangely light and silent on the stage, until he was standing just a few feet away, the shadows of his painted face warping in the uneven light. He raised a single gloved hand and began waving his index finger slowly, motioning for me to come closer, or maybe to step onto the stage with him. It was hard to tell, but the way he stared, unblinking, made it clear that he wanted me to do something. All I knew was that I didn't want to do either. Without saying a word, I let the flap fall back into place and turned away from the tent, putting distance between me and the silent, waving clown. The cold air outside felt like a relief as I walked toward the nearest row of game booths, trying to shake off the weird, crawling feeling that the clown's stare had left in my chest. There, near one of the carnival games, I ran into a friend. Relief washed over me as we started talking, the normal chatter breaking the tension that had followed me out of that tent. We played a few quick games, tossing rings and trying to knock over stacked bottles, and we hung out for about half an hour, laughing and joking under the fading carnival lights. But pretty soon, the lights began to dim, one by one, and the rides started slowing to a stop as the carnival prepared to shut down for the night. People were gathering up their kids, finishing their snacks, and drifting toward the exits, the soft murmur of voices mixing with the rattling of closing gates. I said goodbye to my friend, forcing a smile as we waved, and then I turned back toward the woods, the flashlight in my pocket suddenly feeling heavier as I stepped away from the last glowing lights of the carnival, back toward the darkness waiting at the edge of the trees. I was just near the fence, the carnival lights now a distant glow behind me, when I heard a voice call out, soft but clear, from somewhere just behind. I turned, and there he was. It was the clown, the same one who had waved me over in the tent earlier. Under the dim carnival glow that barely reached him, the colors of his costume looked muted, almost gray, and the painted smile on his face seemed even more out of place under the shadows that cut across his cheeks. He tilted his head slightly, watching me, before asking if I wanted to check out the backstage area of the circus tent, promising there were cool things back there that regular guests never got to see. His voice was strangely calm, almost cheerful, but it felt like it was scraping against something deep inside me, setting off every instinct I had to get away. I shook my head quickly and said, "No," my voice coming out sharper than I meant it to. Without waiting for him to respond, I turned and started walking into the forest, forcing myself to keep my pace steady, even though every part of me was screaming to run. I kept glancing back, every few steps, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness behind me, searching for any movement. But there was none. The clown was still standing there near the fence, just watching, that painted smile still frozen on his face, the shadows making the black lines of his makeup look like cracks. It made the entire moment feel even more twisted. When I was finally out of his sight, swallowed by the trees in the dark, I broke into a run, my feet pounding against the dirt path, the cold air burning in my lungs. I only stopped once I felt far enough away, my breath ragged, trying to convince myself that he wouldn't follow me, that he wouldn't find me here in the dark. I knew I wasn't going to tell my mom what had happened. I loved being able to go out whenever I wanted, to have that freedom. And deep down, I was scared that telling her would take that away. It was a half-mile walk through those woods to get home, and I had almost made it, probably 3/4 of the way. when I heard it again. A sound, a voice, calling out in the dark. And this time, the moment I heard it, my stomach twisted and I felt sick, a cold sweat breaking out along my back. I turned, the flashlight trembling in my hand, and there he was again, the clown. Emerging slowly from the darkness, the beam of my flashlight catching the colors of his costume and the white paint on his face as he stepped into view. Each step deliberate, silent, like he had all the time in the world. He was close now, too close. Panic exploded in my chest, and before I could think, I threw the flashlight at him as hard as I could. It hit him with a dull thud, the light tumbling and spinning across the ground, throwing wild shadows across the trees. And I ran. I ran hard, tearing through the forest, branches scratching at my arms, the cold air slicing at my throat, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. But I could hear him behind me, his footsteps crunching on the leaves, following, getting closer, until the trees finally broke and the road appeared ahead of me, a thin gray strip under the faint light of the street lamps. And then, just as suddenly, I heard him stop. I didn't look back. I didn't care if he was still there or not. I just kept running, pushing myself until my house was in front of me, until I was stumbling up the steps, fumbling with the door. When I finally burst inside, I was gasping for air, my chest heaving like I had just finished a marathon. My mom was there, and of course, she was worried, asking what had happened, why I looked like I had been running for my life. But I didn't want to tell her. I couldn't. So I lied. I told her I had decided to jog the whole way back. She accepted it, and it never came up again. The carnival packed up and left. The woods went back to being quiet, and the clown was gone. But the way he had looked at me, the way he had followed me into the darkness, never really left. Up until I turned 14, clowns terrified me. The fear started when I was 5 at a county fair when I first saw one up close. I still remember the oversized shoes, the painted smile that didn't move, and how it felt like the clown's eyes followed me no matter where I went. It was a cold Tuesday night in November, during break, the kind of night where your breath comes out in little clouds and the streets feel emptier than usual. My parents were away on vacation, and both my sister and brother were out for the night, leaving the house quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears if you stand still for too long. That's when my friend, let's call him B, texted asking if he could come over so we could walk to the fair a few blocks away. I said yes, relieved I wouldn't be spending the night alone in that quiet house. B came over, and we walked through the cold, the streetlights flickering above us as we made our way to the fair. It was set up in a big, empty parking lot, the rides and booths standing under the glow of harsh, portable lights, throwing long, twitching shadows across the cracked asphalt. We wandered around for a while, playing some of the carnival games, our laughter mixing with the distant squeals from the rides and the muffled carnival music playing from old speakers tied to poles. The air smelled like funnel cakes and cold metal, and for a little while, it felt like a normal night. Then we saw him, a clown. He didn't say a word, not even a hello. He just smiled, his lips painted in a wide red curve, and started bopping around, his shoulders jerking up and down as he moved his hands in exaggerated, silly motions. It was the way he moved that was strange, slow but jerky, like a puppet with tangled strings. He felt more like a mime than a clown, silent and watchful, and every few seconds he would inch closer to us, shuffling forward without a sound. His eyes never left us, and the painted smile stayed frozen on his face, making it hard to tell if he was really smiling at all. Me and Bee laughed, but it was that awkward kind of laugh you let out when you're not sure what else to do. Bee reached out and patted the clown on the shoulder, a quick, uneasy gesture, and then we turned and walked away, the sound of our footsteps sharp against the pavement. "That was weird," I told Bee, glancing back over my shoulder, but the clown was gone, swallowed by the crowd and the shadows. "That was more creepy than weird," Bee replied, his voice low, and I could tell he meant it. We started heading back to my house, walking along the quiet sidewalks of our Tuesday night neighborhood, the cold air biting in our faces, the streetlights buzzing softly above. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. They came from behind us, light and measured, just far enough away that we couldn't see who was there when we turned around. But when we turned, the street was empty, nothing but the dark windows of houses and the glow of the streetlights reflecting on the concrete. We kept walking, but the footsteps came again, matching our pace, always just behind, stopping when we stopped and starting up again when we moved. It continued for a few more minutes, the sound following us like a shadow, until Bee finally spoke up, his voice tight. He said he was freaked out and was just going to head home instead. But I didn't want him to leave. I could feel the fear tightening in my chest, cold and heavy, and I didn't want to be alone in the house, not with whatever was following us out there in the dark. "Just stay," I told him, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out thin. "Hang out at my place for a bit." Honestly, I was scared, more scared than I wanted to admit. We were sure of it now. We were being followed. The footsteps had trailed us all the way down the block, weaving through the pools of light from the street lamps, always just behind, never close enough for us to see who it was, but close enough to keep us looking over our shoulders with every step. When we finally reached the front of my house, I felt a brief wave of relief. I dug into my pocket, pulling out my keychain, the cold metal keys clinking softly in the dark. My hands were trembling slightly as I tried to find the right key out of the 3 I kept there, my breath fogging up in the cold air. That's when Bee nudged me sharply, his elbow digging into my side. "Turn around," he whispered, his voice low and tight. I turned, and my stomach dropped. There, half hidden in the bushes next door, was the clown, the same one from the fair. He was crouched down, the leaves shifting slightly around him, but his face was clearly visible under the pale glow of the porch light. His painted smile looked even more twisted in the shadows, and his eyes were locked on us, unblinking, watching. And when he realized we had seen him, he stood up slowly, the branches rustling softly as he stepped out from the bushes. He didn't run, he didn't shout, he just started walking toward us, each step deliberate, the same painted grin frozen on his face. Panic exploded in my chest, and I fumbled with the keys, trying each one with shaking hands. The first key scraping uselessly against the lock, then the second, my breathing getting faster as I felt the clown getting closer, the sound of his slow steps crunching on the gravel of the walkway. Finally, the third key slid in, and the lock clicked. I shoved the door open, and we both scrambled inside, slamming the door shut behind us so hard that the walls shook. For a moment, we just stood there, the sound of our breathing loud in the quiet house, the outside world sealed off by the thin layer of wood between us and him. I grabbed the phone and called my parents immediately, my fingers cold and stiff against the buttons. When they picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady as I told them what happened, but it came out rushed, the words tumbling over each other. They told us to arm ourselves and hide upstairs until they could get home, or until we were sure it was safe. We didn't waste time. We ran up the stairs, the old wood creaking under our feet, and slipped into my little brother's room, shutting the door quietly behind us. We moved to the window, peeking out from behind the curtains, our breath fogging up the cold glass as we pressed our faces close. And there he was. The clown was standing in our driveway, his head tilted slightly back, looking up at the exact window we were standing at. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching, the painted smile on his face catching the glow of the porch light, making it look like it was almost shining. It felt like he was waiting for something, like he was just going to stand there until we did something. I swallowed hard and shut the blinds, the plastic slats clicking softly as they fell into place, cutting off the view of him. We both ducked down beneath the window, sitting on the floor, our backs pressed against the wall, breathing heavily, trying to stay as quiet as possible. We waited, every minute stretching out, our ears straining for any sound from outside. The house felt colder somehow, every creak and pop making us flinch. Within 10 minutes, he was gone. Or at least we think he was gone. We never saw him leave. We never heard footsteps retreating down the driveway. For all we knew, he could have slipped away into the shadows or found somewhere to hide on the property, waiting for us to come outside again. All I know is that I'm just happy we made it home in time. If you've been keeping up with the news lately, you've probably seen the stories, reports about clowns trying to lure kids into the woods. It sounds like something out of a cheap horror movie, but I can tell you, it's real. I know, because I was one of the first to experience it, and it was honestly the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. I'd like to stay anonymous for now, just in case that clown somehow finds out who I am. Anyway, here's what happened. At the time, I was 14, living in a tiny town in South Carolina. When I say tiny, I mean it. Only about 130 people live there, and most days it felt like you could walk from one end of town to the other without seeing a single person. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where people left their doors unlocked, and where nothing really ever happened. Summer was just about over, and I had picked up a summer job working at the local lumber yard. It was a good place to work, the kind of job where the days moved slow and you could let your mind drift while you worked. Mostly, I helped customers load lumber into their trucks, carrying heavy boards and sheets of plywood, my arms and shirt covered in sawdust by the end of the day. It was mindless, but I didn't mind it. It kept me moving, and I liked the way it felt to be tired in a good way, the kind that made it easy to fall asleep at night. Plus, it was a job that kept me in shape. carrying stacks of wood, moving pallets, and hauling materials up and down the yard gave me a kind of quiet strength I hadn't noticed until then. But the best part about that job, honestly, was how close it was to home. My house was exactly 1 mile away from the lumber yard, so walking there and back became part of my daily routine, no matter how hot or sticky the South Carolina air got in the summer. I didn't mind the walk. It gave me a chance to clear my head, watch the sunset over the fields, and let the hum of cicadas be the soundtrack to my steps. Back then, it felt like nothing bad could ever happen on that walk. But that was before I learned how wrong I was. I had spent the whole day hauling and moving lumber, my arms aching in that dull, satisfying way that made me feel like I had earned the sweat on my back. By the time my workday was wrapping up, the yard was quiet, the last customers long gone, and the heavy scent of sawdust still hung in the air. It was about 9:30 p.m. when I started the walk home. The moon had just begun to rise, its pale light spreading across the road, washing everything in that soft, cold glow that only happens after the sun has completely dipped below the hills. The last traces of sunlight were gone, leaving the sky dark, clear, and endless. There aren't any other houses between the lumber yard and my place. Our town is small, but more than that, it's rural, with long stretches of empty road and thick woods on either side that seem to swallow the light as soon as it touches the trees. The road home had these hills that rose up just high enough to block your view of what was on the other side until you were standing right on top of them, the asphalt dropping out of sight like a black wave. The road itself was narrow, with no shoulder, but it was freshly paved, so each step echoed softly as I walked, the rubber of my shoes sticking slightly with each lift. The trees along the roadside stood in perfect lines, row after row, their trunks dark and close together, forming walls of shadow that moved slightly whenever the breeze stirred the leaves. The undergrowth was thick, tangled with vines and brush, but every now and then you could spot a narrow game trail cutting through, little paths where deer or other animals crossed to reach the other side. The sounds of the night were everywhere. Crickets chirped in steady rhythms. Frogs croaked from somewhere hidden in the brush, the whole thing coming together like a rough, living orchestra that followed me down the road. The walk home usually took about 30 minutes, and I had done it so many times that I could almost walk it with my eyes closed. Every crack in the pavement, every dip and curve etched into my memory. It was just another part of my day, nothing more. To pass the time, I pulled out my earbuds, slid them in, and let the world slip away as I scrolled through my playlist. A beat kicked in, something familiar and loud enough to drown out the night, and I started my walk, the music filling my head, my feet falling into a rhythm that matched the pulse of the song. And just like that, I was on my way, walking under the moonlight down that narrow road, surrounded by dark trees, with nothing but the music and the soft glow of the moon to keep me company. I was about halfway home, lost in the rhythm of the music pounding in my ears, when I heard it. A high-pitched, cackling laugh. I froze, the sound so out of place that, for a moment, I thought it was part of the song. My feet stopped moving, and I pulled out my earbuds, letting them hang against my chest as I stood there in the middle of that dark, empty road. What the hell was that? I muttered out loud, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness around me. I stood completely still, my head turning slowly as I scanned the tree line on either side of the road, waiting to hear it again. But the only sounds that met me were the frogs, their croaks echoing loudly in the thick night air, overlapping in a chaotic rhythm so constant and heavy that I felt like even a scream would have been swallowed up by the noise. I held my breath for a few seconds longer, listening, waiting. Nothing. Eventually, I shook it off, telling myself it was probably just my imagination, maybe a piece of laughter from the song that had somehow bled into the quiet. I shoved the earbuds back in, turned the volume up a little louder, and kept walking, letting the music push away the unease curling in my stomach. I made it home without hearing the sound again, without seeing anything out of place, and by the time I crawled into bed that night, the laughter felt like a half-forgotten dream. The next day, I started my shift at the lumberyard at 2 p.m., so I left the house around 1:30 to make the walk over. The sun was bright, and the sky was that clear blue that only seems to show up at the very end of summer. The warmth of the day settling in without the heavy humidity of July. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. If anything, it was the kind of day that made you forget about strange noises in the dark. As I walked, I fell into my usual habit, letting my eyes drop to the road, looking for any rocks that might catch my attention. It was one of those small, stupid things that made the walk more fun, kicking rocks just to watch them skip across the fresh blacktop, bouncing and spinning before rolling off into the grass. I spotted one near my foot and gave it a sharp kick, watching it skip perfectly across the road before landing in the dirt on the side. That's when I noticed it. Lying there in the dirt, right where the rock had landed, was something bright and out of place against the pale dust and dead grass. A bright red ball. I slowed, curiosity pulling at me, and walked over to where it lay half buried in the dirt. I bent down and picked it up, turning it over in my fingers. The surface was smooth, rubbery, and soft. I gave it a little squeeze, and it let out a high-pitched squeak that cut through the quiet afternoon air. And that's when I knew exactly what it was. A clown nose. I stared at the red clown nose in my hand, turning it over slowly as it glowed almost unnaturally bright against the dirt-streaked skin of my fingers. "What the hell is this doing out here?" I said to myself, my voice sounding small in the quiet afternoon. I decided to keep it, slipping it into my pocket before continuing down the road. It felt weird carrying it with me, but I was curious, and I wanted to show it to the other guys at work. It was the kind of thing they'd get a kick out of, and maybe it would help push away the weird feeling that had been sitting in my gut since the night before. When I got to the lumberyard, I pulled it out and held it up for the others to see, giving it a quick squeeze so it let out a high-pitched honk. It got a few laughs, and one of the older guys smirked and told me to put it on, so I did, slipping it over my nose and giving it a couple more honks, the squeak echoing in the open air of the yard. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Just another day. The hours moved by as they usually did, the sun shifting across the sky, the smell of sawdust thick in the air, the hum of trucks coming and going, the sound of boards clattering together as we moved them. By the time 9:30 p.m. rolled around, I was tired in that good way again, ready for the quiet of the walk home. I clocked out, said my goodnights, and stepped out into the cool night air, pulling my hands into my pockets as I started down the road. That's when I remembered I had forgotten my earbuds at home. No music tonight. The silence felt heavy around me, filled only with the sounds of crickets and the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes as I walked. The moon was bright, casting a pale light over everything, and a thin layer of fog clung to the ground, drifting slowly across the fresh pavement like ghostly fingers. As I made my way home, my eyes caught something ahead on the road. A faint image about 150 yards away, a shape standing in the middle of the road, still and dark against the pale fog. At first, I thought it was a deer, the way it stood there, motionless, as if deciding whether to run or stay. The moonlight behind it made it hard to see clearly, turning it into a dark silhouette with no clear edges, the fog rolling gently around its legs. I kept walking, closing the distance slowly, each step loud in the night air. When I was within about 100 yards, it must have gotten spooked. I saw the shape move, quick and jerky, before it darted off the road and disappeared into the thick shadows of the trees, the fog swirling in its wake. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, telling myself it was just a deer, maybe looking for a place to bed down for the night. But I didn't know then that what I saw wasn't a deer at all. It was something else, something far more twisted, something that would change the way I felt about walking down that road forever. I passed the exact spot where I had seen the deer dart off into the woods, the fog still shifting lazily around my legs as I moved, the air colder now that the moon was high overhead. As I walked by, the silence was suddenly broken. Footsteps. They were about 20 yards behind me, the soft but unmistakable sound of shoes crunching against the loose gravel on the edge of the freshly paved road. I slowed down, my head turning slightly, a chill creeping up my spine as I listened. It struck me as strange. Deer don't come back onto the road after being scared off. They run, and they stay hidden. Before I could turn around to see what was behind me, I heard a voice cutting cleanly through the thick night air. "Hey there." The words sent a shock through me, and I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon, was a clown. He stood completely still, his hands hidden behind his back, his head tilted slightly, like he was trying to get a better look at me. His clothes hung off him in baggy folds, the fabric clearly meant to be a clown costume, but it was filthy, so dirty that whatever colors had once been there were now just faded, grimy stains. His makeup was smeared, black streaks running down from his eyes like tears, mixing with the white paint to create unsettling gray smudges across his cheeks. His lips were painted into a crooked, exaggerated smile, but it didn't reach the dead darkness of his eyes, which stared straight into me, unblinking. Slowly, he tilted his head to the other side, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm, almost friendly, but it sent a cold wave of dread washing over me. "You have something of mine," he said softly. "I need it back." And then, as if on cue, he let out a small, high-pitched laugh, the sound bouncing off the trees and fading into the fog. My mouth felt dry, and for a moment I couldn't move, the cold sinking deeper into my chest. I swallowed hard, forcing out words that felt heavy on my tongue. I don't have anything of yours," I stammered, taking a small step backward, then another, trying to put space between us. My eyes darted down the road, calculating. My house was still a quarter mile away. Too far, Too far to just turn and run, but too close to stand here and wait. That was the moment everything changed. The moment the situation shifted from something strange, something I could brush off and laugh about later, to something that was suddenly, terrifyingly real. He tilted his head a little farther, that smeared, painted smile still frozen on his face. "Well then," he said softly, "if you don't have my nose, I'm going to need yours." From behind his back, he pulled something out slowly, and the moment I saw the blade catch the moonlight, my breath caught in my throat. It looked like a machete. No more thinking, no more freezing. I turned around, dug my feet into the pavement, and with every ounce of strength I had, I took off, running down the middle of the road, the cold night air tearing at my face. Behind me, I could hear the quick slap of bare feet hitting the pavement, faster than I thought possible. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. Looking back would slow me down, and I knew I couldn't afford that. I heard the blades, because it wasn't just one, it was two, dragging along the asphalt as he ran, the metal scraping and sparking, the screeching sound tearing through the quiet of the night. I was in good shape, strong from hauling lumber all summer, but even so, I could hear his footsteps growing louder, closer, each slap against the road sending spikes of fear through me. Then, over the pounding of my feet and the ragged gasps of my breath, I heard it. A giggle. High-pitched, breathy, and excited, it slipped through the air and crawled under my skin, feeding the adrenaline that was already burning through my veins. My lungs were on fire, every breath a sharp stab in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I pushed harder, the muscles in my legs screaming as I began to crest the top of the hill. I could feel him behind me now, so close that I could almost sense his outstretched hands reaching for me, could almost feel his fingertips brushing the back of my shirt. And then, like a miracle, headlights cut through the darkness. A truck crested the hill, its lights washing over me in harsh, blinding brightness. The beams caught on the fog, slicing through it, illuminating the terror on my face. I threw my arms into the air, waving them frantically, my body moving on sheer panic, trying to signal the driver, trying to get him to stop, to help, to do anything. And just like that, the footsteps behind me stopped. I risked it. I turned my head, gasping, eyes wild, and saw nothing. No clown, no footsteps, no sound except for the hum of the truck engine and the harshness of my own breathing. The truck rolled to a stop beside me, the window rolling down, and the man inside leaned out, eyes wide with concern, as he asked what happened. Words tumbled out of me, shaky, disjointed, but I got it out. I told him about the clown, the machetes, the chase, the laughter in the dark. He listened, then immediately pulled out his phone and called the police. I never made that walk again, and I don't think I ever will.